The afternoons were the hardest. That stretch of time between 3 and 5, when the silence in the big house on Maple Creek Drive wasn't peaceful, but profound. It was a silence that had weight, texture. It felt like walking through cobwebs. That's when the knock would usually come. 3 firm, polite raps on the front door. I'd glance at the security camera feed on my phone, seeing him standing there, a grocery bag in one hand, a tool case in the other, his face a mask of earnest helpfulness. Mark, my neighbor from 3 houses down. The first time, a week after the move, it was a pie. Welcome to the neighborhood, he'd boomed, his voice too large for my quiet foyer. His wife, Chloe, a slender woman with a tight smile, lingered half a step behind him. My famous apple crumb. Chloe here can't bake to save her life, bless her heart. Chloe's smile didn't waver, but her eyes did. The second time, he'd noticed a loose shingle. Saw it from the street. Hate for you to get water damage. I've got my ladder in the truck. Before I could demur, he was already hauling it around back. My husband, Ben, thought it was great. What a nice guy. In the city, we didn't even know our neighbors' names. This is what community is about, Sarah. Ben was always at the office, or traveling, chasing the next big deal that would finally let us relax. Our new, too-big house in this manicured suburb was a testament to almost making it. It was filled with everything we'd thought we wanted and a yawning emptiness I couldn't name. So Mark kept coming. And he had a strange, unwavering habit. He'd present a problem, a squeaky hinge, a clogged gutter, a questionable wiring socket, and then he'd turn to me, his blue eyes disarmingly direct. All right, boss, your call. How do you want me to handle it? At first, I'd stammer. Oh, whatever you think is best. Nope, he'd say, wiping his hands on his jeans. Your house, your rules. Do I go with the standard brass hinge or the stainless steel? The more expensive one lasts longer, but it's your budget. You tell me. It was intoxicating. In my own life, I felt like a passenger. Ben decided where we lived based on commute and tax brackets. My old job as a freelance graphic designer had fizzled after the move, a casualty of just until we get settled. My days were a monochrome wash of unpacking, organizing, and waiting for Ben to come home, only for him to be exhausted. Every decision, from the brand of coffee to our vacation destinations, felt implicitly, and sometimes explicitly, deferred to his practical expertise. But with Mark, I was the commander. He turned my indecision into authority. He'd listen, head cocked, as I deliberated between sealants or paint finishes. He made my choices feel consequential, wise. He called me boss. One afternoon, he was fixing a stuck window in the sunroom. Stubborn thing, he grunted. Probably just needs the track realigned. But we could replace the whole sash. It's a bigger job, more expensive, but it'll solve it forever. What's your verdict, Sarah? I looked at the window, then at his hands, capable and steady on the frame. Fix it properly, I said, my voice firmer than I'd heard it in months. I'm tired of temporary solutions. He looked at me then, not as a neighbor doing a favor, but with a sharp, appraising glance. Proper it is, boss. That glance became a spark. The spark became a current. Our interactions, always under the guise of handiwork, began to feel charged. He'd bring over 2 types of mulch and ask me to feel them, our fingers brushing. He'd ask my opinion on a new power tool, leaning close to show me the features, the scent of sawdust and clean sweat on his flannel shirt. I found myself dressing better in the afternoons, just in case. The silent house began to hum with a dangerous anticipation. I met Chloe properly at a neighborhood block party. While Mark held court by the grill, boasting about his brisket technique, Chloe and I ended up side by side at the dessert table. He's very hands-on, I offered, trying to be friendly. She gave a short, humorless laugh, picking at a plastic cup of potato salad. That's one word for it. He just loves to fix things. Broken gates, loose boards, helpless women. She said it so quietly, so flatly, that for a second I thought I'd misheard. But when she looked at me, her eyes were deep wells of a quiet, familiar resignation. He needs to be needed, Sarah. Desperately. Just, be sure you actually need what he's offering. The warning was clear, but it landed on the fertile soil of my own neglect. I mistook her exhaustion for jealousy. I was flattered. The next week, the project was my overgrown backyard garden. It's got good bones, Mark declared, hands on his hips. But it needs a vision. Someone to take control. He spent hours there, tilling, weeding, following my sketches for where the lavender and hydrangeas should go. We were both dirt-stained and sweating. He handed me a cold bottle of water. You're different out here, he said, not looking at me. How so? Less polite. You know what you want this to be. It's good to see. Ben thinks it's a waste of time. Says we should just pay a landscaper. Mark scoffed. Of course he does. Some things aren't about efficiency, Sarah. They are about creation, about touch. He finally looked at me, and the air between us crackled. Your husband is a fool to not see what he has. It was the first time he'd ever criticized Ben. It was the breach in the dam. The affair didn't start with a passionate declaration. It started, like all things with Mark, with a problem presented and control offered. It was raining. He'd come over to check for leaks after a forecasted storm. The house was dark, the rhythmic patter on the roof the only sound. He stood in the living room, a droplet of water on his temple. All secure, he said. His voice was low. Thank you, I said, my own voice barely a whisper. The space between us felt like a vacuum, pulling us together. Sarah, he began then, stopped. He ran a hand through his hair. I shouldn't say this, but I need you to tell me to leave right now, or tell me to stay. You have to say it. You have to be in control of this, because I'm not strong enough to be. He was handing me the reins, just like he always did, making my choice the pivotal one. The power was dizzying. The silence of the house, usually so oppressive, now felt like a cocoon, sealing us away from the world where I was an afterthought. Stay, I heard myself say. The first time we were together, it was in my marital bed, a brutal, symbolic infidelity that still haunts me. And afterwards, as we lay tangled in the sheets Ben had chosen online for their thread count, Mark kissed my forehead. You're the boss, he murmured, and I felt a thrill that curdled, instantly, into a deep, stomach-churning shame. The affair became our secret project. He was meticulous, engineering alibi and opportunity with the same focus he gave to a deck renovation. He'd text about fence posts, cement drying times, and the subtext thrummed beneath. He made me feel seen, heard, desired. He orchestrated everything, yet always framed it as my decision. Your call, boss, your rules. But a strange thing began to happen. The more control he gave me in our stolen moments, the more I realized it was an illusion. I hadn't chosen this affair. I had simply said yes to a path he had meticulously laid before me. He didn't love me. He loved the version of me he reflected back, the decisive boss, the grateful recipient of his salvation. He was fixing me, like a broken window. The guilt was corrosive. Ben, oblivious, would talk about what a great friend Mark was. Chloe's haunted eyes at the grocery store felt like accusations. I was living in a house of mirrors, each reflection a different liar. The collapse began, fittingly, with a home improvement disaster. Mark decided we should build a fire pit in his backyard, a joint project. He was over, showing me the plans on his laptop. It was a Thursday afternoon. Ben was in Chicago. Chloe, Mark said, was at a day-long yoga retreat. We were arguing about the stone. I wanted sandstone. He insisted on cheaper, mass-produced pavers. When we heard the back door open, footsteps in the kitchen, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't Ben's heavy tread. It was Chloe. She walked into the living room, still in her yoga pants, her face pale and perfectly still. She looked at Mark's laptop on the coffee table, open to the 3D rendering of their backyard. She looked at me, in my lounge clothes, hair tousled. She looked at her husband, whose face had gone ashen. The silence was absolute. The retreat was cancelled, Chloe said, her voice eerily calm. I've been at the library for 3 hours. Then I saw your truck here, Mark. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just seemed to shrink and solidify, like cooling wax. So this is the project now. It wasn't a question. Mark jumped up. Chloe, honey, it's not what it looks like. Sarah was just asking for advice, and I was showing her. Stop. The word cut through the air. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me. And in her eyes, I didn't see anger. I saw the profound, weary recognition of a fellow prisoner. He's letting you control the narrative right now, isn't he? She said to me, giving you the chance to concoct a story. He's so generous that way. Chloe, I'm so sorry, I choked out, tears of shame finally breaking free. You're sorry? She repeated softly. He's been fixing you, hasn't he? Making you feel powerful, needed. He did the same to me, and to the woman in our old neighborhood in Ohio. His need to be needed is a vacuum cleaner, and we are all just dust. Mark was sputtering denials, but the truth of her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't special. I was a pattern, a project, the ultimate unstoppable neighbor, coming over not out of lust, but out of a pathological need to find something to mend, to control by pretending to surrender control. Chloe turned and walked out. The front door closed with a soft, definitive click. The aftermath was a quiet, brutal unraveling. There was no dramatic confrontation with Ben. Chloe told him. She called him, and with a devastating, clinical precision, laid out the facts. When Ben came home, his face wasn't angry. It was shattered. The foundation of his world, which he thought was built on success and provision, was shown to be rotten. Why? Was all he could ask. A broken whisper in our cavernous living room. I had no answer that could justify it. I felt invisible. I tried, but the words sounded cheap, pathetic. The affair hadn't been about Ben's absence. I realized too late. It had been about my own. Mark and Chloe's house went on the market a month later. I saw him once, loading a trailer. He looked smaller. He saw me, started to raise a hand in a wave, then let it fall. There was no project left between us. I had been definitively, and permanently, broken. He had no use for me. The true infidelity, I see now, wasn't just the physical betrayal of my marriage vows. It was the deeper betrayal of myself. I had handed my agency, my sense of self, first to my husband's benign neglect, and then to my neighbor's toxic rescue fantasy. I had mistaken control over paint colors and garden layouts for control over my own life. Ben and I are in counseling. The road is long, paved with raw honesty and the rubble of our old life. I am learning to make real choices, not just react to the options presented by others. I am learning to sit in the quiet of the afternoons and listen, not for a knock on the door, but for my own voice, which for so long I had let go silent. The title of this story was almost true. An unstoppable neighbor kept coming over and letting me control everything. But it was a lie. He was never unstoppable. I just